A Christmas Carol, adapted from the original by Charles Dickens. It was Christmas Eve, and Mr. Ebenezer Scrooge sat busy in his counting house, solitary as an oyster. His business partner, Marley, had died 7 years ago this very night, leaving the old miser to run the counting house by himself. Nobody ever asked, "My dear Scrooge, how are you?" But what did Scrooge care? He liked being left alone. The door of Scrooge's office was open that he might keep his eye upon his clerk, Bob Cratchit, who sat in a dismal little cell beyond, copying letters. Scrooge had a small fire, but the clerk's fire was so very much smaller that it looked like one coal. He couldn't make it any bigger because Scrooge kept the coal box in his own room. Bob tried to warm himself at the candle, but being a man of little imagination, he failed. Just then in came Scrooge's nephew, Fred. "Merry Christmas, Uncle," he said. "Will you come and dine with us on Christmas Day?" "Christmas," said Scrooge. "Bah, humbug." The frost and fog hung about the city as Scrooge made his way home at the end of the day, but when he put his key in the lock, he glanced up at the door knocker and saw that it was no longer a brass knocker. It had transformed into Marley's face. And then it was a knocker again. "Pooh-pooh," thought Scrooge, closing the door with a bang. Up Scrooge went to bed, not caring a button for the dark. Darkness is cheap, and Scrooge liked it. But then he heard the sound of a heavy chain being dragged up the stairs and coming straight towards his door. It was Marley's ghost. "I am here tonight to warn you," said the ghost, "that you have yet a chance and hope of escaping my own sad fate. You will be haunted by 3 spirits of Christmas. Expect the first tomorrow when the clock strikes 1. Scrooge tried saying "humbug," but stopped at the first syllable. Bong! The hour bell sounded, a deep, dull, hollow, melancholy one. Scrooge found himself face to face with the first spirit. It wore a tunic of the purest white, and round its waist was bound a lustrous belt, the sheen of which was beautiful to behold. "Who and what are you?" Scrooge demanded. "I am the ghost of Christmas past." They passed through a wall and traveled back in time and across open fields until they came to the village where Scrooge had grown up. The spirit pointed to a building of dull red brick. "The school is not quite deserted," said the spirit. "A solitary child, neglected by his friends, is left there still." It was Scrooge when he had been a small, lonely schoolboy on Christmas Day. "Poor boy," said Scrooge. "Spirit, show me no more." "I told you these were the shadows of things that have been," said the spirit, "that they are what they are. Do not blame me." And then Scrooge found himself in his bedroom again, where he sank into a heavy sleep. Bong! Bong! The clock struck the hour of 2. Scrooge awoke to see his own room, but it had undergone a surprising transformation. There was holly and mistletoe everywhere. and a mighty blaze in the fireplace. In the middle of the room stood a jolly giant, glorious to see. "I am the ghost of Christmas present." The good spirit led Scrooge straight to Bob Cratchit's house. At the table sat Mrs. Cratchit, waiting to carve a very small turkey. Then in came Bob Cratchit, with his son Tiny Tim upon his shoulder. Alas, for Tiny Tim, he bore a little crutch. Bob took up his place at the table and proposed a toast. "A Merry Christmas to us all, my dears." "God bless us, everyone," said Tiny Tim. "Tiny Tim looked so frail, Spirit," said Scrooge. "Tell me if he will live." "I see a vacant seat," replied the Spirit, "and a crutch without an owner. If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, the child will die." "Oh no," said Scrooge. "Oh no, kind Spirit. Say he will be spared." Then he heard Bob making another toast. "I give you Mr. Scrooge," declared Bob, "the founder of the feast." "Founder of the feast, indeed," said Mrs. Cratchit. "That odious, stingy, hard, unfeeling man." By this time it was getting dark, and snowing pretty heavily. Scrooge and the Spirit continued through the streets until they reached the house of Scrooge's nephew. "And my uncle said that Christmas was a humbug," Fred declared to his guests. "Still, I mean to invite him to dine with us every year, whether he likes it or not. Here is a glass of mulled wine to hand. Let us toast to Uncle Scrooge. A Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to the old man, wherever he is." Bong! The clock struck again. Bong! Bong! Scrooge looked about him for the jolly giant, but it had vanished. Then he beheld a solemn phantom, draped and hooded, coming like a mist along the ground toward him. "Am I in the presence of the ghost of Christmas yet to come?" said Scrooge. The Spirit answered not, but pointed onward. The Spirit and Scrooge walked through the city. The Spirit stopped beside a little knot of men. Scrooge knew these men. They were men of business, very wealthy and of great importance. They were talking of an acquaintance who had recently died. "When did he die?" asked one man. "Last night, I believe," his friend replied. "It's likely to be a very cheap funeral," the first man said. "I don't know of anybody to go to it." "Spirit, I feel our parting moment is at hand," said Scrooge. "Tell me, who is the man who has died?" The Spirit led him to a churchyard and stood among the graves, pointing down to one. Scrooge crept towards it, trembling as he went, and following the Spirit's finger, read upon the stone his own name. "Spirit, help me to avoid this lonely fate," cried Scrooge. "I am not the man I was. I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall live within me." Ding dong bell. The Christmas bells rang out. Scrooge awoke, and he was home. The bed was his own. The room was his own. Best and happiest of all, the time before him was his own, to make amends in. He rushed into the street. Golden sunlight, heavenly sky, sweet fresh air, merry bells, oh glorious, glorious! I am as giddy as a schoolboy. A Merry Christmas to everybody. A Happy New Year to all the world. What's the day today? Cried Scrooge to a passing boy. Today? Replied the boy. Why, it's Christmas Day. Do you know the poulterers have sold the prize turkey? The one as big as me, replied the boy. No, it's sitting there now. We'll send it to Bob Cratchit, said Scrooge. When Bob Cratchit came into the office, Scrooge declared, Merry Christmas, Bob. I have decided to raise your salary and help Tiny Tim. Here, said Scrooge, have a cup of mulled wine. Scrooge walked about the streets and watched the people excitedly hurrying to and fro with presents and patted children on the head. He had never dreamed that any walk, that anything, could give him so much pleasure. Finally, he turned his steps toward his nephew's house. Why, bless my soul, said Fred when he heard the knock upon the door. Who's that? It's I, your Uncle Scrooge, come to dinner. Will you let me in, Fred? And henceforth it was always said of Scrooge that he knew how to keep Christmas well. To Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone.